So what is a while loop in Python? A while loop specifies a condition or a block of code that is to be executed until the condition evaluates to false, or the loop is explicitly ended with a break statement. Moving on to the next slide. So here you can see the syntax of a while loop. So a while loop is defined using the while keyword, and then you have the expression followed by a colon. After that, you have the statements inside the block. The statements are executed until the condition evaluates to false. Now on the right side, you can see the flow chart to show all the steps to execute a while loop. So you can see here we have the test expression. If the test expression evaluates to true, then we execute the statements that are present inside the while block. But if the condition is false, we will exit out of the while loop. Now before I move on, I have a question for you. So here is a Python quiz question. I want you to tell me the output of the below code. So this is regarding a list. I have declared a list called alpha that has D, F and C as its elements. Then I'm saying alpha plus equal to KA, which is again a string since it is within the single quotes. Then I'm printing the list. Now you need to tell me what is the right answer. You have four options here, A, B, C and D. The first option is D, F, C, Ka combined. Then we have Ka in the beginning of the list, followed by DFC. The third option or the C option is DFC Ka, Ka being individual elements. And the last option, the D option, is Ka DFC. Please go ahead and solve this question and put your answers in the comment section of the video. We'll be more than happy to know from you. Alright, now let's go ahead and start with our demo. So here I am on my Jupyter notebook. Let me rename my file. I'll say while loop in Python demo. Okay. So let me start by writing a simple while loop. I'll declare a variable called I equal to 0. Then I'll start with my while loop. I'll write my while keyword and this will run till my I is less than 10, let's say. I'll give a colon, and if I hit enter, it will come to the next line. You can see the indentation here which is being maintained. I'll say I equal to I plus 1. So I am incrementing my I value. Then I'll say print I, and I'll use my end parameter, and I'll say end within single quotes. I'll say hash and give a space. Then let me say print again. So here my while loop will run until my I value is less than 10. So we are continuously incrementing the I value and printing the I value. Let me run it. There you go. You can see the result here. We have printed the I values starting from 1 till 10, and after that we have come out of the loop. And you can see the hash symbol being used here because we used our end parameter as hash. So by default it is a new line character, but we have explicitly defined our end parameter as hash followed by a space. Cool. Now let's move on to our next example in this video on while loop. I'll define a variable called count and I'll assign a value 0. I'll say while my count is less than equal to 5. I'll give a colon, come to the next line, and I'll print the condition is true, and then I'll say count equal to count plus 1, and then I'll say print end of loop. Let's run and see our result. You can see here we have printed our message. The condition is true 5 times because our expression is being evaluated 5 times here. in the 6th time our count is no more less than equal to 5, so we end the loop, and here you can see the message end of loop. Cool. Now moving ahead, you can also use the break statement in a while loop. Let me show you how to do it. I'll say while true, so I am declaring my while loop to be true, and I'll say please type your name, and I'm going to take my name as input from the user, so I am specifying the input function. I'm going to check if my name is equal to let's say Gilly, then I should give a colon here. I'll break out of the loop and then will print thank you, you typed the correct name. Alright, so what I am doing here is I'm going to run this loop till the user enters the correct name. So I have declared my name as Gilly. If you enter any other name apart from Gilly, this while loop will continue to run and execute. Let's run it. Okay, so here it says please enter your name. Let's say John. If I run it, it is again asking me please enter your name. Let's say this time I'll say Amy. You can see here it is again asking for the name, so I'll enter my name. Let's say Hopkins. Again, our entered username doesn't match the name that we have provided in the code. Let's say this time I'll say Gilly. If I hit enter, you can see we have our message, thank you, you typed the correct name. Okay. Now moving on to the next example, we will see how to find the least common multiple of 4 and 7. So I'll give a comment as LCM of 4 and 7. Now you would know it is 28, but we are going to find out with the help of a Python while loop. So first I'll declare a variable x equal to 0. I'll say while my expression is true, I'm going to increment my x value to 1. I'll say x plus equal to 1. This means x equal to x plus 1. I'm going to use an if statement and say if not, and here we'll pass the condition x percentage 4 or modulo 4 or x percentage 7, then I'll say break. Finally, we'll print our message saying x comma, and I'll say is divisible by 4 and 7. Say both 4 and 7. Okay, so what I am doing here is I am taking my expression while true, I am incrementing the value of x each time and checking if this is true or not. Now at the first instance, when my number x is divisible by both 4 and 7, I am coming out of the loop and we are going to print this. Now let's see what's the answer. There you go. You can see here 28 is divisible by both 4 and 7, and hence the LCM of 4 and 7 is 28. So this is the least number which is divisible by 4 and 7. Alright. Now you can also use the continue statement. How you use the break statement to come out of the loop, you can also use the continue statement to continue running the loop. So I'll say I equal to 0 while I is less than 10. So this is my expression. My loop is going to run until I is less than 10. I'm going to increment the value of I. I'll say I plus equal to 1 if, let's say I set my condition, if I equal to let's say 6, then I'll say continue my execution and skip the current step where I value becomes 6. Then I'll say print I. Let's run it and see the result. Okay, you can see here we have printed 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and here you can see we have skipped the execution where I value became 6 and continued with the next iteration 7, 8, 9 and 10. So this is how you can use the continue statement and the break statement in a while loop. Alright. Now moving ahead, you can also use the else statement in a while loop. Now let me show you how to do it. I'll say I equal to 1, then I'll write while I is less than let's say 5. I'll say print I, then I'm going to increment the value to I plus equal to 1. Now here you can use the else statement and say print I is not less than 5. Let's run it. You can see here we ran our loop until I value was less than 5. So we printed 1, 2, 3 and 4. When I value became 5, we printed I value is not less than 5. Cool. Now moving ahead, so you can use inbuilt functions inside a while loop. Let me show you how to use the pop function and remove the elements in a list using a while loop. So I'll declare a list of numbers, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4 and we have 5. So these are the 5 elements that are present inside list A. I'll say while A, so I'm iterating over all the elements in my list. I'm going to say print A dot, I'll use the pop function. So what pop does is it is going to remove the elements from the end of a list. Then I'll say else print there are no elements left in the list. Alright, let's run it and see the result. You can see here we are removing the elements one by one from the end of the list. So first we popped out 5, then 4, 3, 2 and 1, and after that we had no more elements left in the list, so we printed there are no elements left in the list. Okay. Now the next program, we will take numbers as input from the user and calculate the average as long as the user enters a positive number. So I'll give a comment, average of positive numbers. Cool. Okay. So I'll start my program. I'll declare a variable called num which has a value 0. I'll declare a variable called count which also has a value 0. Then I have sum which has a value of 0. I'll write while my number is greater than equal to 0. So this condition is for accepting only positive numbers. I'll say num equal to, I'm going to take the positive numbers from the user. So I'll pass an input function. I'll say enter any positive number. Then I'm going to say if my number is greater than 0, I'll say count equal to count plus 1. Let's make this greater than equal to 0. Then I'll say sum equal to sum plus my number. So here I am keeping track of the numbers that we have entered, and here we are calculating this sum, that is the cumulative sum. Then I'll say ABG, which is to find the average. I'll say sum divided by my variable, that is count. Then I'm going to print total. I'll say total sum of numbers, give a colon followed by a space, give a comma. I'll say sum, then I'll say average, give a colon followed by a space, and I'll pass in the variable ABG. Alright, so here I have my program ready, where we are using a while loop and an if statement to take numbers as input from the user and calculate the average as long as the user enters a positive number. So let me run it. Okay, it says enter a positive number. I'll say, let's say 5. Again it's asking for a positive number. I'll say 7. Let's say 10. And this time I'm going to enter a negative number, so I'll say minus 6. If I run it, you can see here the total sum of numbers 5 plus 7 plus 10 is 22, and the average is 22 divided by 3, which is 7.33. Alright, let me give a space here for more readability. We are going to try it again. I'll say 40, 50, 30, and let's say 100. This time I'll enter a negative number, let's say minus 90. Okay, so you can see here I have entered 4 positive numbers, 40, 50, 30 and 100. So the sum of numbers is 220, and the average is 40 plus 50 plus 30 plus 100, which is 220 divided by 4, which is 55. Cool. Now moving on to the last demo in this while loop with Python tutorial. So here we are going to guess a number. So the user is going to give a number between a certain range, and based on a random input generated from the program, we are going to guess the random number. Alright, so for that I'm going to start by importing my library called random. I'm going to say n equal to random dot randint, which is a function to generate random integers. I want to generate between 1 and 100. Let's go ahead and print that number n. Then I'll use a variable called guess, which is going to be a user input. So I'll say input, which is my function, and I'll give the message enter an integer between 1 to, let's say, 100. Okay. Then I'll start my while loop saying while n not equal to my variable, that is guess. I'll say if my guessed number is less than n, I'll print the message as your guess is, let's say, low. Then again I'll say guess equal to, I'll take the user input I'll just copy this message and we'll print it here. Okay, now I'll say elif if my guess is more than my random integer, will print, I'll just copy this, we are going to print your guess is, let's say, high. Then we are again going to ask the user to guess a number between 1 to 100, and after that I'll say else will print you guessed it correctly. Then we'll break out of the loop, and finally I'll just print it. Okay, so what we are doing in this game is, before that let me just give a comment as guessing game in Python. So first of all, we are generating a random integer using the library called random. So the integer will lie between 1 and 100. I am going to print that integer. After that, I am taking a user input. So I'm asking the user to enter an integer between 1 to 100, and I'm checking if my random integer is not equal to my user input, that is guess, and if that guess is less than my random integer, I am going to print your guess is low. Then I'm again asking the user to input an integer between 1 to 100. Then I'm saying if the guessed value is more than the generated random integer, will print your guess is high. Then after that, I'm again asking the user to input an integer, and in case the random integer matches with the guessed number, will print you guessed it correctly. Alright, let's try this out. Okay, so here you can see, so my program generated a random integer 48 that lies between 1 and 100. So our loop will only stop executing when we enter our number as 48. Otherwise, it will keep on running and asking you to enter an integer. Let's say I enter 50. You see here, your guessed value, that is 50, is more than the random integer 48. So we have the message, your guess is high. Let's say I'll say 30. This time my guess is low, you can see it here. Let's say I'll take my number as 300. You see here, this time my guess is high, which is more than 48. But if I say my user input to be 48, and if I hit enter, there you go. We have our message printed, you guessed it correctly. Alright. So that brings us to the end of